In this video, I will be demonstrating watercolor painting technique paired with other mediums as in salt, gouache paints and also pastel, and how to combine them together in order to enhance a simple painting. Hello and welcome to Run My Arts watercolor painting series. So the subject of painting today is some tiny white flowers which are from the wild. They're categorized as wildflowers. It could be a wild carrot's flowers. As you can see in this reference photo, these are actually poison hemlock that I took from a nearby field. So these tiny flowers are quite interesting and pretty, but in order to paint them, it's a bit a struggle given the nature that they are very tiny and white in color. So I'm going to just show you a very simple technique to create an impression of these flowers. And in order to do this, I'm going to kickstart using the wet on wet technique. So in order to do this, you will have to tape your paper onto your desk or board, simply because the paper would start to curl up or warp from the surface of the desk or your board in the process of drying. So as you can see here, I am pre-wetting the entire paper with some clean water. So to ensure that the entire paper is thoroughly wet, because the first layer of painting is going to be totally wet on wet technique where it's going to produce soft washes. So you don't want hard lines. And the first color that I'm using here is a cobalt blue light from Schminke Horadam, and I'm going to mix a hint of turquoise in it so that I achieve a very sky blue shade. And as you can see here, I'm dropping in that light wash of that paint onto the pre-wet surface, thus resulting in that soft wash look. Of course, you can choose a darker shade if you prefer to paint those white flower on a darker background, but I'm just trying to show you that we can still achieve that white flowers look onto a very light background, which is that light sky look. And I'm sure you would have noticed that I have repainted with the same cobalt blue mix onto the same wet area because I wanted it to be slightly darker. So you can keep doing that until you're happy with the look of it. But otherwise, if you're afraid to reload the paint onto the pre-wet areas, is completely fine. You can also adjust that in the second layer of painting, which I will show you later. So the next color is a light orange mixed with a hint of magenta. I want that peachy sunset look below that light sky blue. So once again, I am just dropping in, applying the paint, wet paint, onto the pre-wet area. And as I painted the second shade, notice there's a hard edge between the blue and the pink shade. So I'm just using a clean damp brush to soften that edge. So the third shade is going to be olive green yellowish, also from Schminke Horadam. And this is going to represent the field or grass of the poison hemlock flowers. So once again, dropping that onto the pre-wet surface of the paper. As I said earlier, this entire layer is painted using the wet on wet technique. So before we move on to the second layer, you have to ensure that the painting is completely dry. And once again, as for the second layer, I am once again repeating the wet on wet technique. So pre-wetting the painting surface with clean water before I drop in the same three shades that I have applied earlier. So by doing this, the painting would appear much darker. Simply because watercolor are usually transparent, you can't achieve a darker look in your first layer itself. Sometimes it's safer to paint them on layers. Another advantage of painting in layers is that it becomes a deciding factor where you could judge whether To proceed with the second layer of painting, as in darkness of the shades that you want to use, or just leave it as it is. So in this second layer of painting, I've decided to increase the amount of magenta into that peach shade look. So once I'm happy with the look of this painting, I am going to drop in some fine grained salt while the painting is still wet. So remember to do this while the painting is still wet, otherwise the salt effect might not result in the effects that you want to achieve. So I'm just dropping it randomly here and there. So this is what it looks like after dropping those salt, and I'm also going to clean up the corners of the painting, which is the taped area, because they still have these paint blots, which I don't want them to accidentally touch the surface of the painting when I do the next adjustments. So we're going to leave this entire painting to dry. So once the painting has completely dried, this is the outcome of the salt effect onto the wet painting. You achieve some flowery like patches, which is also known as cauliflower effect. So since it has dried, I'm going to scrape off the salt completely from the painting. So as you remove those salt granules from the dry painting, just try to be gentle, don't be too harsh. So be patient when you remove them. So done with the salt scraping, I am going to pre-sketch a basic stem and stalks of the poison hemlock or your wild carrot flowers, so that you get a rough idea on where you want them to be painted on this cauliflower effect. So basically the cauliflower effect or patches created by the salt are going to act as an impression of those tiny white flowers in the background, because as you witness with your naked eyes in the field, you can see roughly some mushy looking white patches of those flowers. You can't really see them in detail until you go closer to them. So only the ones on the foreground seem to be more intense in color, while the ones in the back, they seem more blur. So these patches help you to achieve that effect. So once done with the sketch, I'm just painting over the sketch using my rigger brush, and the shade that I'm using is the same olive green yellowish. And as for the smaller size stems that hold the individual flowers, I'm using a scrape brush so that I achieve a fine line. So done with the stem paintings. The next medium that I'm using is white gouache paint, and after mixing with a nice thick consistency, I am using my mop style round brush, which has a narrow tip. This is from Da Vinci Casaneo series. So I'm going to drop in the form of random dots or patches onto those stems that I've painted earlier. So keep applying the white gouache paint randomly, especially focusing on those tiny little stems. So you may be wondering, as in, why the need to have the salt effect if you could just paint those white gouache paint right away onto the dry painting surface earlier. You can do that. It's just that I felt it might look too sharp. I feel that we could take advantage of creating more effect on watercolor painting, and something that looks too sharp may look too boring in my opinion. They might look like sticks jutting out, as in fake flowers or plastic flowers. So I thought, since this is a scenery in a field, I want it to look more natural. Hence I thought that salt effect would give you that blurry look in the background, which creates the impression of lots of those poison hemlock or those wild white flowers in the background. And at this moment I'm using the splatter technique to create impression of even more tiny little flowers of the poison hemlock flower. So you can do this by using any brush of your choice. I'm using here a fan brush. You can use an old toothbrush to achieve this micro dots effect. So moving on, I am painting some grasses effect using the same rigger brush and olive green yellowish shade that I've used to paint the stalks and stems. So just randomly creating some leaves and grass in the background. So just randomly create those impression of leaves and grasses in the background. You don't have to be so thorough about it. At the end of the day, it's a very simple impression of this wildflower in the field. Also extending the same green shade mix in the form of splatters, micro splatters, using the same fan brush. If you don't prefer to have the green splatters, it's okay, you can skip that. I just thought of having some contrast between those splatter effects. So done with all the wet medium, time to use dry medium, which are in the form of pastel pencil and soft pastel. So if you don't prefer to use any sort of pastel, then you can totally skip this step. But I would say it's a good way to enhance the look of your entire watercolor painting, as it adds more vibrancy, because pastel pencils or soft pastels as a whole are very well known to create that dark and vibrant look, given the nature of their material and colors. So you're just going to apply minorly, not too much, as in the form of highlights onto the stems, the leaves. So, and you can also darken some of those gaps in between, just to create some contrast, as in creating a depth in the foreground. So as you apply this dry medium, you can just leave them as it is, as in drawing some scribbles or doodling on them, or you can even soften them further with your fingers after applying them, especially when it comes to soft pastel. Once you have applied those soft pastel, you can just dab on them or blend them with your finger. Otherwise, you can also leave them as sharp effects where you want the highlight to be much stronger, especially on the tips of the flowers. And you can use some contrasting colors. That's the best part of using pastels. Use some contrasting flowers so that the white tend to stand out as well. It may sound weird, but as you witness my painting over here, the moment I apply all those contrasting colors, as in yellow, orange or pink, somehow the white starts to pop up as well. So that's the magic done by pastels. In other words, the contrast effect can be easily achieved using pastels. And there you go, a vibrant looking white wildflowers, which can be easily painted using a very impressionistic way without even painting every single detail of it, with the help of so many mediums that I've showed in this video. So if you liked this technique, then do hit the like and share button, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And hope you try out these techniques, and happy painting. So see you in another tutorial. Bye.